I am going to start by welcoming everybody in this March DAPChat. And we're very pleased to have Scott Morehouse and Wes Lupher. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the names with us today to talk about what ranchers do with draft animals on their farm. And I'm here for representing the DAPnet. So for those of you who don't know who we are, um, we provide, I'll read the mission because I always mess up the words. So we provide connection to resources that preserve and advance the use of draft animals in the working landscape. And my name is Daphne and I'm from Quebec. That's why my English is a little poor. Please forgive me. So without further ado, we'd like to hear about you, Wes, and then Scott after. Just maybe start with introducing yourself and the farm, the operation, and what you do with horses, and maybe like the percentage of horse activity that you have in your farm. Let's say you use them every day, or are they just or are they used once a week? Just to give us an idea.
All righty. I'm Wes Lupher. The ranch here on part of the old family ranch that was homesteaded by my ancestors in the 1860s. And I run about 200 mother cows, give or take, depending on the year. I've had as many as 240. At one time when it was all together, we had a considerably bigger operation, but Dad and I ran 500 mother cows for a long time. And it got split up amongst the kids, and I wound up with a third of it. It originally was an old time big cattle ranch. They ran from here to Cody, Wyoming. That's about 300 or 400 miles worth of range. And it got reduced down a lot since, through the generations and hardships and things like that. But I put the horses to work. We always used them on the ranch. One of my first jobs was in the hay field, raking hay with a sulky rake, and we put the hay up loose and a team of horses. And then we kind of got away from it. We always had teams to feed our cows with. But when I left and went in the service and came back, I went back to using the horses for feeding wherever I could, and a lot of our other chores wherever I could. When I got my part of the place alone, I started using them more and more. The smaller you are, the less equipment you can afford, as far as tractors and things like that. And I thought, geez, I'm going to put these horses to work, and I got more horses, put them to work more things. And I'm still doing that, incorporating them wherever they can work and be, where they can excel. And it's a mixed power deal for sure. I'll probably cut, 80% some years, more than that of my hay with the horses. And that's with some modernized equipment, some old equipment together. And we'll harness teams about, I want to say better than 300 days a year. Cut up to 400 acres of hay and 1,000 tons of hay some years on a good year, usually about somewhere between 600 and 800 tons of hay, and use them wherever we can in a hay field, rake and stack and loose hay, pushing loose hay up when we're putting loose hay in, hauling big bales to the stack, things like that.
And so how many
I use
horses?
them in the off seasons. Oh, well, I probably, let's see, and that varies quite a little too. I take in a lot of outside horses and use them too for people, sometimes for pay and sometimes just because I'm short of horses. But I've got 6 full teams of horses and 2 full teams of mules, and one spare here and there usually, and just about an unlimited amount of them that are a phone call away if somebody wants teamwork. So it's a useful thing for me in a lot of ways. Um, and we'll put them to work through the spring to dragging those feed grounds and uh, breaking up the manure, um, hauling various things. We flood irrigate, so I've got to open up the ditches for irrigation, and I do a lot of that with the blade. So we'll have to haul the sods and use that to build dikes and dams and things. And I do all that with my horses too, and various other chores.
Um, I'm sure we'll have questions later too, because I want to remind everyone that we're here to talk and discuss. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to, you can raise your hand on the, I know it's very technical and not everyone's used to it, but you can raise your hand on in the Zoom application, or you can find the little hand gesture, or you can ask your question in the chat and I'll make sure it is answered. So that already raised so many questions for us, but we also want to hear Scott, so we can ask better questions to each of you. I don't know if he's we haven't heard him yet. I don't know if he's hearing us. Scott, can you
Saw his
hear
name on for
us?
a second.
I can. Well, if he's not there, we'll ask him later. But I already have so many questions. Um, so you said did you learn from you said the farm, your business was on your family ancestors, it was family owned. Um, so, oh, I think Scott just answered.
You may have figured out
I
how to.
just saw him.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Cool.
I'll keep my question. Do you want to present, and then I'll ask the question to Wes?
I am in Southwest Missouri. Like Wes, I'm on a family farm that goes back several generations. My grandparents, great grandparents had teams. I'm also an old veteran, so I kept on going on deployments. And I said, when I come home, I'm going to buy a team. I already had horses, but I didn't have teams, and that was quite a while ago. And my addiction, probably the best way to put it, started. I'd pull a piece of junk out of the weeds and fix it up, and start going out and working with it and see how it went. And that kind of led into a bunch of different things. So yeah, I spend more time feeding with mine than I do actually doing hay with them. They can do everything that my tractors do. So if I want to pull my 10-wheel V rake, I throw 4 horses on there and go. In Southwest Missouri, in the summertime, it gets pretty warm. So you're limited to how much you can actually do with your horses just by the weather, the heat and humidity. So that limits what I can do. But yeah, I've got 100 beef cows. I've got bale unrollers I have tractors also. But I don't know. I'll let you guys ask questions rather than tell you all about me.
Well, I had my question for Wes, but I wrote down a few questions for you too right after. So yeah, I was asking about Wes, your farm was family owned. Did your family use horses before, and did you learn from them? So.
Yep. My dad was born in 31. And his dad, my great granddad, he didn't get mechanized until well into the 60s. He just would not get a tractor. And so my dad spent that, 30 odd years completely horse powered. So I had a pretty great reference there. He he had to do it enough. And at that time, when his great granddad, they were running 2,000 cows, and they just they started on the 4th of July and they quit when it snowed out. They never seldom got done. But so he had to, use them in a variety of ways, and that was what they had. But he also, surprisingly backed me up when I decided to put the horses to work more. He said, "You can do it. It is doable." Nowadays you don't hear that from modern production agriculture people, even ranchers. Granted, mine is small for compared to most of my neighbors, but they can still contribute in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. And do you do you teach your kids, or do you teach people? Do you take a how do you say interns? Do you take interns, or does that happen?
Well, yeah, a lot of times if people stop by to see me, they're I end up with lines in their hand whether they want to or not sometimes. But I've taught, and my kids, they've got no choice, although they love it, they do, and they all drive, um, they all operate, the hand equipment, manure spreaders, whatever. They've got to do it all, drive feed teams, and they do it and enjoy it, and they own some of the horses. Um, so but the new teamsters, or a lot of people show up wanting to learn it or think it's interesting or neat, and I said, well, come on and we'll train you. And so I've got help that comes off and on that are getting competent, and I've got solid teams to put them behind. So it's kind of a helping myself out by passing these things on.
It helps the whole community. We all thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, oh, Tim, you have a question, you can go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wonder what your neighbors think, because I know here I'm in Michigan, and the coffee shop talk is always pretty interesting for anyone who doesn't toe the line. So I wondered how each of you, what they think about that, and if they think you're obsolete and don't know it yet.
Oh, I totally understand that. And surprising amount of people are supportive of it, but you hear plenty of them tell you how crazy you are for doing it, and that you're wasting time or whatever. But I catch a lot of flack for it off and on. First time I was mowing hay up towards there's a highway runs up along part of the ranch, and that really surprised me, the amount of comments I caught from it. Some good, some bad, but a lot of them never understood until I got enough help and things going up along there in that big field, how much we could get done. 2 or 3 teamsters, 3 good mowers. Then it kind of clicked, and they can see the usefulness of it. And a lot of them have come around. My neighbors, some still say, well, I don't have time to, for instance, like Scott and I feed cattle a lot with him. Say, well, we don't have time to feed cows with horses. And there's really very little difference for me. Yeah, if I spend 1 more hour a day feeding, it's not going to bother me. I've fed as many as 600 head of cows with 2 teams of horses. It is absolutely doable.
Once you got your horses ready, um, like he said, on the feeding or even the whether you're cutting hay, if the weather lets me, that yeah, my neighbors thought I was a crazy man too. And that's kind of fun. That's okay. That gives us something to talk about and give each other a hard time about. But if they're willing to show up and see what the horses can do, they're usually pretty amazed about what they can do, and that's a part that catches them off guard, not realize how many other things that we can do. And you can use the same horses for so many different things. So I don't know. I've got the modern mower that Wes and I both have. I remember why I went and bought a disc mower for my tractor, because I was so tired of a mower that couldn't cut this type of grass. And that modern mower, 2 horses are pulling an 8-foot bar, and I've got a 70 horsepower tractor pulling a 9-foot bar, and that's 2 horsepower right there. And this thing doesn't get bogged up by the same stuff that the old mowers did. So yeah, that kind of catches them off guard when they see stuff like that.
Yep, it does.
So the question is, do you have you have PTO carts, I'm guessing, to run all these mowers, or is it
Mine is ground driven. Both
okay,
of them are ground driven. I do not have a PTO cart. I do have hydraulics for my cart. So if I want to put a drill, or if I want to put a rake or whatever, I can do that. It'd be similar to what's on a Dewey's bed. That type of hydraulic setup is battery operated, and that works fine for me.
Right.
And 2 of my mowers are motor driven. Run on a 9-horse Honda engine, very fuel efficient. 1 9-footer, 1 7-footer, and we can and have laid down 40 acres of hay in a day. On very little fuel. I maybe burned 3 gallon of gas doing that, 3 to 4 maybe. So that's big enough for me. And I've got 5 McCormick Deerings that are usable. I've not got to put them all in the field at once. The most we've had in at once has been 5 mowers, but that's knocking down a big swath of hay.
Sure is. Sure is. We do 100-acre here, and I can't believe you do that much. So I had a question regarding feeding too.
On you can outrun your other equipment easily. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think there's a lag with our internets. Yeah, regarding feeding. So what are, for those of I've never seen a rancher at work, and I've never seen a ranch at work. So how do you proceed for feeding? Wes, you said you had loose hay, so are you putting the loose hay, or
Yeah.
do you still have loose hay?
Well,
Or
I do have a big round baler. And so, and it's, it's a big one. But I can, roll up a lot of hay in a day with that when I need to. So I'll put up round bales, some little square bales, and some loose hay. And occasionally I'll have a guy come and custom bale some 3x3 bales, and typically put the big bales up for hay that I've got to haul from different locations. And it's sure a lot more convenient. The loose hay is been a little limited. I've put up so far is about 70 ton. That's probably going to expand here in the next few years as we get our equipment put together. A lot more low tech, no twine, burn very little fuel doing it. Very, very little input on that.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous of him, but he's ahead of me on the loose hay on the outdoor side. I do have the old dairy barn that you can put loose hay in, but my stacker's not ready yet. Most of what I will do is round bales, and I do some square bales also, and I do some loose hay, but that's more for fun than it is. The animals like it better than they do the round or square bales. The hardest part for me putting it in the barn is I have to fork it all out. It's easy to get it in the barn. It takes a little bit more effort to get it out of the barn.
So how do you do that? Are you using tractors for that part, or?
to fork it in the barn. No, the horses pull it in the barn. The pulley system that was 100 years old. So you have horses on, you can use one or two horses, and the hay hook into the hay, and they just pull it right in the barn. So you just pull the wagon right up by it, and you need one person at the wagon, one person with the team, and one person inside the barn to trip it. And that's how you just put it in the barn. They just pull it right in there, and once it gets hooked up on the trolley system, they can put it wherever they want in the barn and drop it. And you can do square
Get it?
bales, yeah, and you can do square bales with the same system. And the horses, that's an easy job for them. You
So
don't,
how would you hook your bales with that same system? Because I'm what I'm seeing is I would see the forks for the
right?
loose hay, but how do you pick up your squirrel bales? Let's
You
say
can do 8 or 12 bales at a time.
Okay.
And you stack them so where when you stick in your forks, it puts the weight against the bale, so it holds them together.
Okay.
So it'll be too high, and it'll just spread out like that. And you put your forks in like you're thinking. I can't
I'm
show you
seeing.
now, but it goes through that big loft door right there, and it works just fine. It's probably equivalent to by that time it's equivalent to putting a round bale in there, as far as weight goes.
Very
Back
interesting.
if you're dropping the hay, and sometimes that's 20 feet, so you might bust a bale or two doing that once in a while.
Okay.
But it's actually faster than if you have the hay loaders that you put your square bales on to put them in the barn. It's actually faster than waiting on that belt to put them in there. Pulling them in like that, it's not faster than a good crew of young kids who are in shape, but they're hard to find anymore.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think Tim has a question. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I wondered if either of you have any videos of any of these operations that you're doing. I know putting up loose hay it's actually pretty physically demanding, at least at my age. So I wondered how much help you had and just a sense of how you organize your activities along those lines.
While you answer the
Well,
questions, I'll just find a
there's
video. Go ahead.
what's that now?
I'm trying to
Oh,
find a video.
oh, yeah. There's a lot of various ways. There's big production ways of putting loose hay up too. There's a ranch here run about 2,000 cows, and they still put their hay up loose, but they're mechanized. Um, and I do stack some of my loose with farmhand stacker. They're the old loose hay attachments, and then some with a what's called a Jayhawk stacker, and that's just horse drawn. You engage basically a reel, and it'll pick your header up, and it'll go to 21 foot before it dumps. I just got that a year or two ago. But the beaver slide stackers and overshot stackers is typically what we're used around here. And we're trying to get one put together on my place here before too long. But you can put, what it typically is going to take for me on loose hay, your mower teams out in front, give you 2 or 3 days in ahead of your rakes. And depending, I can use the V rake like Scott does. It doesn't pick up as well as say the dump rakes or sulky rakes. But so we'll have raking team or two, couple mowing teams depending on the mowers we're using, and then buck rakes. I've got 2 of those, actually 3, pushing it to the stack about 600 pounds at a time, sometimes 7, depending on the load. And you try and set that up stacking outdoors to where your stacks are in a good location where you're not having to push too far to your stacks or it becomes inefficient. You're just wearing horses out. So that's something we are trying to. The old ranch was set up that way. You know, you're pushing hay 200 yards max to a stack yard. You know, and a lot of it's closer than that. And then you go in the stack with it. And a lot of times you can put it up without much manpower in the stack if you use a cage. But usually, I I got a cage, but we'll just build it from the ground up. One or two men on the stack, and we'll swap those guys out, put them on another piece of equipment every hour or two. It is hard work up on that stack. It's like walking in 3 foot of snow, 2 foot, you know. And pitchfork work is fairly tough, but it's fun and it's good for you. It'll wear you out, but it's a good way to do it. And what if you use the cage? Then I'll put a man in the stack to top that off. Then you pull the cage away, and if you dome the stack right, it'll get water. Has been in the stack for a few years, 2 metal and it'll green about a inch grind around the outside of it, and bright green is the I put in the stack. It will keep very well if you do it.
Okay, the method that I usually pick up the loose hay is to put it in the barn, and I have a loader that goes on behind my wagon, and it will pick it up and put it on there, kind of like what you used to see. And you still see them a little bit on square bales. It pick up the square bales, and you can put it beside your trailer. And in that case, you need 2 people. One person moving the hay forward and spread it. And if you walk it in, you can get a lot more hay in it. And one person driving the team, one person can do it, but it's a lot of work. And good days, the best way to do that is have 2 or 3 wagons going. So you have one at the barn getting unloaded and one at the field getting loaded up. And on my fun days, I'll have an old hay press going too. So somebody can be doing that, but it's usually having at least 2 wagons going. So that way one's at the barn being loaded all the time.
I'm sharing my screen with you guys to show you what we do. So that's, yeah, I don't know if you can see it, but that's one way to load.
Yep.
loose hay. I have a really terrible video, but that's pretty much what I have for unloading. But yeah,
I've had other people take videos, but I never usually, I'm usually not the one getting to take the video. I have gobs of pictures, but not many videos.
I'll try to find a video of how you drop the hay in the barn. If that can help, I don't know if it helps anyone, but for those who don't know what loose hay is, because it's pretty technical. And the techniques you're talking about are, different from one place to another, which is really interesting to hear.
My grandparents, they used to put loose hay outside also. We have more moisture where I'm at. So you about need to get it off the ground a little bit before you start stacking it. Then you can crown it over and be okay. Probably. I'm still on the experimental state on that because I don't know of anybody else who's still putting up loose hay outside around here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're the only ones in Quebec still doing it. I don't think there's anyone else, and it's rare. And you seem to I find it very interesting because here people are going not against, but no one finds the utility for loose hay. So why are you turning towards loose hay, and why are you trying to what's the advantage for you as ranchers?
I guess you could say I made enough hay that I get kind of bored doing it one way. So doing it more than one way is a good thing. So unrolling some bales is good, and feeding some squares is good, and feeding some loose hay is good. It's just good for my, and I like to change it up with my horses too, just to do something different. So put anything you can put in the barn.
There's a lot to that.
If anything you can put in the barn, you don't use it that year, you still got it next year. So
Right. What
Mhm.
about you, Wes? What's
I
yours?
see less spoilage on my loose hay outside. You know, we're fairly arid at a 7,000 feet elevation in southwestern Wyoming, and we can be very arid at times. But if you stack it right, that hay will keep it. It'll look like a little brown loaf. It'll settle far down. It looks pretty ugly, but you crack into it, it'll keep 2 years, 3 years. And generally we don't have that much carryover, but 2 years is the most of the time. But my what the reason I like it is, number one, it does keep better than round bales or square bales, big or small. Um, it also is a cheaper operation all the way around. Um, Probably like Scott understands too, we get to use a lot of more fun toys and get to teach your horses a lot more jobs. Um, Buck raking and running that stacker are really different. I mean, it's a horse on either side of the apparatus, and it takes a good horse to excel at those jobs. And I love watching them learn those jobs. It's things about being a teaching the new jobs, I think, to your horses and people. But I'd say it's very economical. Your input is so low on that. A lot of your stuff is homemade.
Um, and so forgive me if I'm not hearing the words right, or so you're using a rake that you're pushing with the horse? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay, so I want to hear more
yeah.
about
So
this.
we will cut it. Yeah, you'll cut it and cure it. And sometimes I can put hay in the stack in 36 hours out here, dry and windy, or in a bale. But and then rake it, usually with dump rake or side delivery rakes. You know, I've got 3 or 4 of those, and and then we push it. And that buck rake is it's kind of like a basket, one 14-foot wide, one 12-foot wide, yes, two and one 10-footer. But you'll get on that windrow and just shove it. It's got fingers in front of it and about a foot apart poles, and it'll bring it up into a bunch, and you just push it towards the stack. When you get enough on there, move from side to side, fill the basket full as you can, and head it for the stack, and then set it down, back out of it, go again, and just start pushing butts of hay up towards the stack, so the stacker can start placing it on the stack. So it usually, I've had as much as I figured about 800 to 1,000 pounds on that, but usually it's going to be about 600 pounds of hay. And your team sits behind that basket, horse on either side, crazy wheels in the back, and you can turn it very sharp. It's kind of like steering a caterpillar, uh, uh, crawler. You know, you slow one horse, let the other speed up, and that'll turn your rake. And then your lines are set up slightly different. You want those dead even on bit. So you're just stopping and starting or slowing one horse and letting one go ahead. They're not together at all. It's like a set of reins on a riding horse tied together.
Oh, okay. I'd
If
like to find a picture of that.
you look at it, the picture makes it look like the horses are actually pushing, but they're not. But that's what it looks like when you actually see them doing it. When you see the setup,
Yeah, they're not,
Yep.
they're tied. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so the horse does like when you first put a horse on that kind of raker, if they haven't done it before, what are their reaction? Because there's something in front of them. So how do you teach them to?
Yeah. It's very different. First thing they were going to want to do is go over to their teammate, you know. So you've got to be watching that. I have broken a few cross braces on them. Those horses will just just make the move before you're ready and step on it or smash it or something, but not hard to fix. But it takes very little to keep them going straight. And once they understand that job, it's a little bit of a sensation for them having that hay bunch up in front of their face for a bit. But it's pretty physically tough work at times, so they get the hang of it and they're concentrating on pushing that load more than they are worrying about anything else. The Jayhawk stacker, same type of deal. The basket's in front of them, but when that hay starts lifting, just pay attention to your horses and talk them through it. And a lot of times I'll stop them, let them think about it, and go a little further, let them think, a little further, let them think, and talk to them. They pretty well come around fast.
The thing I learned with horses was there were times when I had to stop what I wanted to do and focus on training horses a little bit. And once they catch up, then you can focus on the job. And that's something different than a tractor. But that's also part of the fun of it, It may put you a little bit behind in the short term, but in the long term, it doesn't. And once they get it figured out, they like to work.
Right. Tim has a question too.
Yeah.
And while Tim asks his question, I'll share my screen for what I think the rack you're talking about, and we'll talk about it all after his question. You can go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, along the same lines as Daphne. I was just wondering how you trained your young team. What was your process for training young teams, and how you bring them in to actually doing work? I mean, is it just trial by fire, or at what age do you really start bringing them along, or how does that work for you?
No, I think that's different for a lot of people. I'll tell you kind of how my process is. And there's a picture of Buck Rake right there, pretty close to what I've got. But anyway, I break all mine open bridle. I break them all to work single until they're solid with everything I do with a horse single, including some log and light log and things like that. And then I'll put them in a team, and then I go from there. But I spend a lot of time, and a lot of people tell me I waste a lot of time on my horses doing groundwork, and I sack those colts out just completely with feed sacks and noise and everything and that's before they're hooked to anything, before they got a bit in their mouth. Everything I'll sack on them, get them where they stand out in the open, be harnessed, and ropes around their feet, bags around their feet, and noise behind them, and then start driving single and go through probably the same thing everybody else does, and add to the noise, add to the weight, let them get over it and continue on, and then I'll put them together and work them. I think that's going to some of these jobs where, like Scott and I, on the mowers and engines behind them, that confidence goes a long ways as a single horse, and being part of a team with a whole bunch of commotion going on behind them. Everything is chasing a horse that's working in a harness. So I like them really desensitized and confident and going good before I put them to anything work. I don't like taking chances with the horse or my equipment or myself. If I can help it, to try and mitigate all of it, I can.
Well, to me, when you go out and you mow, you go out and you plow, you go out and you rake, and rake is probably the easiest job. That's a pretty simple job for a team. I mean, as far as you can do a lot of things, they can learn a lot right there, and I've got an old standby horse that I can hook about any knothead beside, and that horse is gonna that horse is going to be in charge. So that other horse isn't going to get away with very much. And sometimes maybe you put 3 horses and you put a knothead in there, and those horses help teach too. I will do that. I'm not taking away what Wes does. I do the same thing, but I also use that old horse. I brought some horses around that just kind of have some issues, and after you'll find out whether they're going to continue to have issues or not, and it works, but yet if you start on a simple task, just like mowing or raking, or once you go into wood and you start pulling logs, that's a little bit more dangerous. So you have to pay attention there. Because I have a lot of timber around here. But going out and gathering firewood with them, that's a simple job for them.
Right. So that leads to a question, like I don't know if you buy horses or if you breed horses on your farm, but what makes you when you look at a horse and you see it working, or what is something that you look for into a horse, for a good working horse in your operations? It's a broad question,
I had a wise guy tell me a while back, and I've learned this more and more as I've gotten older. He's like, focus on the feet. If you got good feet, you got an awful lot right there. Draft horse,
But
that's kind of an issue.
yeah, I agree with that the old adage, no foot, no horse. My big deal, my first thing is disposition. I used free horses and mules for so many years, and they were usually teams that run off, mules that people were scared of, things like that. And, using horses my whole life, riding them, working them, and everything I could get by them. But it taught
Oh, we're losing you. We can't-
uh,
we didn't hear the last
disposition
sentence.
is a huge deal. And most of the work I'm doing, or a good deal of it, is by myself. Disposition is the big one for me.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I like that. The disposition, that's an important thing for me on the draft horses. If I can't trust my horse, because I am working by myself all the time. I'm hooking them up by myself. I don't have a lot of help most of the time, so I have to be able to trust my teams, and things break and you have to get off and you have to go do things, and I expect my team to stand. Some people tell you that's not safe, but I expect my team to stand. I don't. If I have to worry about a horse that's a little bit spooked, I got to be picky about what jobs I take them out on.
Yep.
That's for me, my feeding routine right now. It's going to take me through 6 gates. My place is strung out up down this river. Probably 6-mile round trip feeding and going through all those gates. And when you don't have somebody getting gates, which is most of the time, that team's got to stand at those gates while you get them. Whether it's 2 or 4 or 3 head, whatever I got hooked on. When they get young horses getting going, that I haven't been able to have that tree, but it's still easier getting in and out of a tractor.
Can you, oh, I think Dawn has a question. You can go ahead, Dawn, before my question.
Yeah, my question is for Wes and Scott too, but I think Scott may not use the mower as much that I'm asking about. I was wondering if your your McCormick Deerings, if any of them were trailer gear, or are they all regular gear or high gear?
Well, I'll tell you what, Don, I've been studying on that, and I think you and I discussed this on the internet a time or two, on a forum or two, and I've got regular gear. Everything else is high gear, and I do believe, and I just got that regular gear last year, and if I could find trailer gears, I'd run all of those, or regular gears. These high gears, I'd come to the conclusion that but that's all I had around here. But the high gear seems like your horse just you gotta want more speed to run those, and the thicker and heavier that hay is, more so. I think your low end torque on that thing, it's I guess similar to a truck pulling, uh, um, a 355 rear end in your Dodge Dually is not near as good as that old 411 rear end when you're going through tough things or pulling hills. So but what I've got is high gears and one regular gear. And that's, I thought about seeing if I could get those changed or just trading mowers out as I can for regular or trailer gears. Trailer gears are awful hard to find around here.
But you don't have any trailer gears now. You haven't switched anything yet.
Mark?
Don, have you used trailer gear mowers?
No, I was just curious about what your experience was with them.
No, I haven't either.
I asked the question because I'm developing a new theory about trailer gears, and I was going to test it on you, but I don't think I can because I don't think you've tried them to test my theory. My new theory is that the people that really love trailer gears keep all the shoes on their mowers set lower than I do. That's my newest theory about trailer gear mowers. I'll go off page again.
That's interesting. There's a lot of, there's so much variation in crop. And I see guys back east mow, and, I use east, a lot of countries east of me. I'm cutting a year. One cutting grass, and sometimes towards the end of the year, that's big and rank. The undergrowth is just nasty. And, it's just the way it is. You can have grass. It's different. The front end of hay and seeds, I can use top serrated knives and be okay. Grass gets mature, and certain grasses later. It's a smooth section, and start today, or you're just dragging your brown brick pits. So I think there's a lot of difference in your, and far as the height of your cut, things like that. I will vary that also. Beginning of the year, I'll cut a little closer. A little later in the year, I cut a little higher, just trying to stay out of the mouse nests and things like that.
Around here, we have a lot of fescue, and that fescue gets pretty rank towards the end or middle to the end of June. And honestly, my number 9 has a hard time cutting it. And sometimes the Bermuda can be the same way. It has a hard time cutting it. That's where that double barred mower comes in pretty handy. I don't have that problem there if I keep the blade sharp, and that's the same thing for any mower.
Mm-hmm. It is the sickle. the difference being, fertilized hay, fertilized and irrigated grass hay here can get really rank, especially in August. Typically don't start cut until mid-July. But it's going to vary. If I'm not in places that's not rank, I put the number 9s to use more. That really rank hay or lots laying down hay, a lot of nests and things in it. I will use the ESM German cutters. They work real well.
I don't know if we had other questions on mowers. I feel a little lost when this is very precise. There's a lot to know. Oh, Tim has another question, probably about mowers too. You can go ahead. You can ask your question, Tim, if you want.
Okay, now I'm finally got it off mute. Now, I was just wondering about what probably both grass species you're growing. I picture Wes, I think, with some prairie haze, big blue stem. Maybe I'm not familiar with what's out there, and I think Scott mentioned tall fescue and Bermuda grass. I didn't know if there's any, what else would be typical out there.
On my place, it varies quite a little. The bottom end ground is actually out on some old blow sand dunes, and that stuff. Pretty much we transplant or planted Garrison's creep and meadow foxtail out there, fast growing. It's not my favorite hay or the cows. It puts up a lot of tonnage, and it's the kind that can't do well down in that country. 6 foot tall plus. If you let it get too tall, the hay and go 4 tons of the acre, and sometimes 5. It gets heavy of dry hay. And then at home, I've kept it a little more traditional with, timothies and clovers and red tops and some native grasses, some bromes in the drier ground, and creeping meadow foxtail in the wetter ground. Typically, that's going to yield less hay, say from 1.5 tons to 3 tons of the acre on that stuff. It gets a little differently too. That tall stemmy stuff, that Garrison creep meadow foxtail, if it's standing up, a number 9 will whistle right through it with sharp knife.
Yeah, I have a lot of fescue and orchard grass, and it'll have clover mixed in with it, and that's my spring hay. There are some people that'll have some brome around here. There's a few people who still raise alfalfa, but you don't see as much of it as you used to. And I'm just far enough south that you'll also have Bermuda hay. And most of the hay I cut is fertilized. We try and get the volume out of it. That Bermuda hay, when it's fertilized, or crabgrass, that can be hard on a sickle mower to cut, but like I say, the one mower I have that I like the best on it, it can cut anything. I've had it lock up on me a little bit on some crabgrass, but that's about it. And we try and keep a lot of clover in our grasses too.
Yep. That I&J does not plug. That system, I don't know. I've been for a long time on it. It doesn't plug. There's times when it's not as good as a standard sickle and with rock guards and really, really fine hay. And I think the other system works better than, but other than that, it's really hard to beat.
Well, the Bermuda grass and crabgrass is pretty fine hay. But that can lock anything up, at times. I mean, but if there's a spot in a field that I hit and I don't know what exactly is in there, but it's kind of tough to cut no matter what I have. But most of the time it can cut about anything. My old number 9, I'll be pulling it sideways in that.
Mm-hmm. What knife sections were you using, Scott?
On which one? On my number 9?
On the number 9.
There, I've got 2 bars. One's a heavy serrated and one's a light serrated. Or actually, I've got more than that, but those are the 2 I use the most. And the light serrated, I think, does better than the heavy serrated does.
Oh, question for you. Serenaded is the little dents?
Yeah, the
Is
notches.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah. So one would be like a fine grade sandpaper versus a bigger, wider.
Yeah.
And I think the fine grade does better than the big notches does.
All right.
Especially for that fine stuff, like the Bermuda.
My experience with all that stuff was those sections and sharpen, and then I was cutting through the pretty well everything other than one variety, a kind of a wire vessel growing that block here ground that I've got, and there ain't nothing like it. But it does better. Even the I&J will give it a hard time, but my smooth sections and fresh sharpening job at lunch, that machine, those machines, I guess, all of them, they cut a lot better for me in the tough cut conditions.
It's faster to change out bars on a sycamore than it is to sharpen up all on the blades on the disc mower. So, to change out a couple bars is a pretty quick job. So, when I stop to eat lunch, and that's kind of what I do, is I just change out bars and put on the bars.
Yeah.
How many bars do you like? Maybe that's a stupid question, but
You're
how many
changing
bars?
to serrated.
Well, I'll change at lunchtime, something like that, or I'll run for half a day, and then I'll run for the other half a day with the other set of bars.
Okay.
Nice sharp, usually it is, you know. So usually at night I'll sharpen when I'm done, and lunchtime is swapping knives. Usually not sharpening, depending on how many, what all I've got going on. But a new sharp knife is what I should have said.
We have a question from Joshua that is not related to mowers. So before I ask it, did you have any other inputs, advice, maybe what would be the best mower? Well, that's a tough question because depending on what you grow, but what is a mower that you best like in your situation, or is your to go maybe?
I think it varies so much from crop and places, and the amount of ground you got to cover is a huge issue. I'd like to say up to 400 acres of ground for me. That made me really, in order to keep my horses in the field and work, and versus going to a tractor, I had to invest in bigger mowers, and that I&J was the step for me with the motors. Ground drive, I've thought about a lot. There's times we have mowed full day with teams on engine driven mowers, and on ground drive mower, I just don't think I can do it. But the amount of ground you got to cover, the crop you're cutting, things like that, I think what amounts to is what your scale is going to be, and how much money you're able to invest. A good rebuilt number 9 on our gear might be the best option. of all of those for a lot of people, or two of them. They're good machines from crops,
There's
and they're affordable.
yeah, there's people in my area who's put the motors on the number 9s or number 4s or something like that, and they've had pretty good luck with them. But I haven't tried it myself. But they felt like that was a game changer. I'm talking about some Amish, and they felt like that was a game changer for them.
Right. And they're more accessible, I find. Well, are they?
You can find them around here. You can find them about any of horse auction, draft horse auction you go to. You can find them. There'll be some that are rebuilt, and there are some that you can rebuild yourselves. And they seem to keep on showing up. You'd think they'd run out of them, but they don't.
So Tim has a question. Tim, is your question related to mowers? Because I want to ask Joshua's question too after the mower talk.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that, talking about motorized mowers versus ground driven, we did some draft measurements a number of years ago. And with the ground drive, number 9, for instance, one half of the pulling force is just powering the knives and cutting the crop material. So actually just cutting the crop material, not even powering the knives. So if you can cut your draft in half, and you've got to want to keep your animals moving during the day, I mean, that's a good, if you can cut their workload in half, you'll work longer, and they're going to be more productive.
Right.
It is.
Are you ready for Joshua's question? Finally. Is there a trustworthy source to get an engine with a PTO? I have a 4-cart, but would like to have the ability to add a PTO to make it more versatile while also saving on a power cart. And he's from Cincinnati, Ohio. Ed.
I didn't quite catch the front of that, Daphne.
Is there a trustworthy source to get an engine with a PTO? That was the main question. And his question is in the chat too.
I don't know now.
Yeah.
I don't, I have a power cart that I use sometimes, that I have borrowed, but there's not a lot of them around me. And where I think it's going to be nowadays, find the right farm shop, Amishmen who are building them with Pioneer out of the game. I don't know. Scott, do you know of anybody?
I had a ground driven cart that was pretty popular. But as far as like you said, I don't know of anybody who's making other than Amish who are making engine powered carts. And the thing about an engine cart is it seems like you need to add another horse just to pull the cart for a long period of time. But there's a lot of people who can do a whole awful lot with them. It seems to me that most of the time I want it just on my mower. I don't need it on everything. So I don't really care about the engine cart. I just kind of put the engine on. It makes sense to me to put the engine on what I'm going to use it, whether it's the baler or whether it's the mower or whatever. But I think that's kind of an operational decision, what you're going to use it for. If you're using a power cart all the time, but I don't know of anybody who makes it anymore.
Well, and I think it's going to depend a lot on what you're using it for. The light stuff that I've done, all the running foot hay buying or big manure spreader, things like that. Maybe PTO driven fertilizer spreader, things like that, versus something big enough to bale hay with. And I don't know. I couldn't quite wrap my head around getting one that'll turn 90 horsepower on the shaft. I'll just use a tractor for stuff like that. But
Yeah, I can't. I'm missing most of your words. I don't know if I'm the only one, but that's
No, I
why
was.
I can't answer. But Tim has a question. You can go ahead, Tim.
No, just a brief comment. If you're interested in powered four carts, usually horse progress days, you'll see several of them. Most of them are on probably on haying equipment, but other things as well. So if you're serious, I think it's in Indiana this year. I'm not sure, but that's the place to go. I think to some of the Amish that build them are going to be demonstrating them there. So
Yeah, that's
look
what
into it.
Don wrote. I think HPD stands for horsepower. Yeah, right.
Right.
Um, I could dive into another topic before we run out of time if you want. We haven't talked about harnesses. And I'm curious of what kind of harnesses you use. And I was when you talked about heat, Scott, I was curious because my mentor, we have a big talk about heat and harnesses and sweat pads and whether or not we should use sweat pads with horses. And my mentor disagrees with the use of sweat pads because he thinks um, they're they keep the most moisture and that they're hard to dry. And he's proven it to me, but I'm still I don't know. I don't know. I can't keep my head over. I don't know how to make my opinion, and I want to hear what your opinion is as you work horses in uh, pretty warm temperatures. What are your thoughts?
I I have collars with pads on them. I don't know if they're really sweat pads. Um, worry more about the neck themselves and and the wear on that than I do about the sweat pads. Um, harness itself is all pretty much bio. Is well, I got nylon and bio both, but I kind of like the bio better. Um, but as far as when a horse is getting when it's hot and humid out, you just got to give them a little bit more breaks every now and then, let them blow for a little bit. I just haven't found you know, that's what I'll do. I found out that mules can last a little longer in the heat.
What about you, Wes? What's your
Can't hear them.
Okay, yeah, I'm not the only one, right? I can't hear him either, so we can't hear you, Wes. I don't know why your microphone is on. So, but in the meantime, if you have an input too, I would love to hear yours too on that question, on that matter, because I'm curious.
Well, I don't want something that's going to absorb moisture. Um, I would rather have the other type of pad on them. And I don't think
Any kind of pad. I call them sweat pads, but they're also I don't know
So,
how to call them in English. Yeah.
so the pads I use are vinyl coated foam, and
Yeah.
some people call them healing pads. They're definitely not the sweat pads of old that had deer hair and the ticking, and that would get soaking wet. I like to use them because I get better fit. Like Scott said, I'm interested in making sure I don't get sore necks. But there are people that get good fit. If you can get a good fit with a collar without the pad, that's okay too. I just find I get a better fit on a wider variety of horses with a bunch of collars that I swap back and forth till I find the right one. That's how I use pads. I like them for the fit. I don't believe it's a big difference in terms of heat. I haven't seen the collars being the determining factor in how long a horse is going to work in the heat.
Mm-hmm. I it's a big topic with him because he's always trying to take pieces of the harness off, and I keep questioning his choices, even though he's done that for his whole life, and but I keep questioning that choice. He has D rings and he took the saddle pads off, which for me just makes no sense, but in using a D ring, but he's telling me for the sweat purpose. But that's why I'm asking you all, because you work on horses every day too, so your input in that. So yeah. Wes,
I
we
don't,
still can't hear you. I'm so sad. It's okay. I mean, we're if you can chat in the chat maybe, but I don't know what happened. Maybe your Wi-Fi happened to because I think we've had a little bit of struggle with that. Um so I'll ask question to the other folks, but in the hopes that you can find a way to answer.
the only
Um
part I've had to worry about is where the tug straps come back, where maybe that rubs right there. And that's on one set of nylons I had that I don't like. But other than that, as far as heat and rubbing on the horses from the collar or from the harness themselves, I haven't had issues with that. And I mean, they're soaked, you know.
mhm. So harness fit before any sweat. That would be my intake, but I'm just a 25-year-old, not gonna tell my 60-year-old mentor what my opinion is. You must have good reason to think so. Um, I had other questions too before, because the time is flying. We only have like 10 minutes left. And we lost Wes, which is sad. Um, unless you can sign language it, Wes. I wanted to compare both models, but both models Scott has and Wes has, but um, we'll do that another time or on Facebook. Um, but just that's a really broad question that I ask in most of the DAP chats. But what makes you go still, what makes you use horses every day? Like when everything goes wrong or, it's such a bad day, what makes you keep going? And maybe more at the beginning when you started and you probably had a harder time, motivating yourself. What is the core of your motivation in working horses?
In my case, I guess they're just relaxing. They have a brain. It's like for me, you got two teenagers out there that you're messing with, and so they think sometimes, and it's kind of fun to be ahead of them a little bit on what they're thinking, you know. So I enjoy that. Um, a tractor, it doesn't have a personality. Each horse has a personality, you know, and I like that.
Yeah. So that's your main motivation when things are harder around.
When you started out, it's kind of hard to learn how to communicate right with them, you know, to get a horse to understand what you really wanted. But um, I don't know, now it's not so hard to communicate with them to figure out, what the horse is thinking or what they want. I mean, there's days when they don't want to, but for the most part, um, I guess you could, fixing the horse drawn stuff is so much more simple than fixing the tractor stuff. Um, and so much less expensive. Um, and like I say, you got personality there with what you're doing with the animals. You just have to listen to them a little bit.
Right. And on the same kind of topic, what would be a good advice you would give to a teamster wanting to reintroduce or introduce horses on their farm, and where to start, like what are the easiest or simplest tasks that you can start with, and any advice that would go with the start of using horses on a farm?
Get to know your animals well to where they trust you. When an animal trusts you, that's a big deal. Um, that solves a lot of problems right there. I've had horses help problem solve me out in the timber when we're pulling logs in some pretty crazy places. But that doesn't happen if they're afraid of me. That only happens if they trust me, and I have to get to know them well enough to be able to do that. So you just got to spend the time with them. And keep on presenting new things to them. That's what I like to. I see some other people who do contests of pulling or whatever, and they only do one thing with their team, and that would just bore the tar out of me. And as far as I'm concerned, it bore the tar out of my horses too. So I like to mix it up and do different stuff. You can't do that in the beginning, but you just gotta, don't just hook them up once a week and go to a show. You got to mess with them. You just got, even if a friend of mine would say, even if it just hook them up and go to the mailbox and back every day, that's not a bad thing. Yeah, you need to spend some long hours with them too, but if you're only using them once a month, don't be surprised if they have a few quirks. You got to spend some time with them.
That's a good advice. Yeah. To any horse that won't stop, they won't stop. Put some mileage on them. Is that what you would say? Um, and then, um, can you tell us about a story that you would like to share with us about a challenge that you've overcome with your horses, or a pride or success that you've managed to come around, or um I know it's a broad topic, but I was just looking for a story, interesting stories, about what it is to be a rancher and having horses, and things that can happen while feeding or haying, or that are interesting to hear for
Well,
us,
I
for
don't
those
know
who
if this fits into that or not, but I can remember having a big old walnut tree that fell halfway down, and not very far from the bottom where I'm pulling that tree gets hung up at, there's a big 5-wire barbed wire fence, and there's no way I'm gonna get a logger or get a tractor or anything in there to get that tree out. And one of my old reliable horses that I trust, she kept on helping me problem solve when we got that tree down, and that was a pretty big job for that team of horses to get that tree down. And then after we were able to get it down, we were able to cut it up and get it into manageable logs to get it out of there. And so yeah, that's kind of fun. It's fun when the horse helps you out a little bit on something like that. So because I didn't have that one all the way figured out, you just keep on trying to get it figured out.
Can you hear me now, Daphne?
Yay! I like that story, Scott. I find it very interesting. I think the trust is huge, huge.
No, maybe
No,
not.
Yeah,
Can
we
you
can.
hear me at
no.
all?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can.
we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I've got one quick little one throw in there on the horses. I feed a fairly long feed trail. I'll work four head up on a bobsled in the deep snow, and when they get to the point where they walk that feed ground, and I'm just back there pitching hay off, and that has to happen. I mean, I've got to have the horses do that at some point in their life, but wrap the lines up, make them do a right hand circle every day. And when they get that, I can just wrap the lines up, feed hay, and they'll walk circles until I tell them to. Sometimes they'll get littler, but they will do it. And teaching them something like that, you cannot have a tractor ever do.
Yeah.
I've watched videos of Wes out feeding into some crazy wind and snow and stuff like that. And that would spook a lot of animals, and they're just acting like this is normal, Um,
Yeah.
that didn't happen overnight.
No.
So we're heading towards the end of our chat, but did you have anything else? Oh, we didn't do the the comparison. I'm missing this word a lot, but we didn't compare both of your of your businesses, and I was really interested to, you know, can we hear about, maybe are you haying, doing more cuts, or is any of you using I know you're using mules, Wes, but is there any equipment size? I didn't hear how much acres you were doing, Scott. So if you're interested, maybe
With my
so
horse,
months.
yeah, with horses at my place, I do with or with the hay on my place, I'll do with the horses. The hay that I cut on other places. So I don't know. 300 round bales on my place, and the rest of the hay I do on other places, and I'll do that with tractors, but I don't try and haul everything to other places. When I say round bales, I'm talking about round bales, or 4x5 round bales. And I don't know, depending on the year and who I can get to help me is on the loose hay, and that's kind of the hard part there, is I don't have the help that I used to.
Mhm.
And it's going to vary a lot on mine. Last year, I think I put up 1,300 5x5 round bales, and I think about 300 3x3s on all the ground total, and then a few stacks of loose hay, a little bit of little squares. I didn't get as many of them as I wanted to do, but it'd take me a lot of hay to winter up here. We'll feed for 6 months solid, sometimes more. So I have to have a lot of forage in the stack to get through winter.
Right, because Scott, you have how many months of, like, I'm really bad with
I've already mowed
geography.
my yard
Um,
once this year, so we are starting to get green here. I'm still feeding hay, but it won't be long till I'm done feeding hay. Depending on how dry it is, I may start in October, and I may get till somewhere in November before I start feeding. Then there's some years where I feed. Lately, we've had some years where I fed more months than I haven't fed just because of dry weather. But as far as ideally, November till the end of March is when we feed hay.
So that's 5 months.
Yeah, we'll start depending on the cow herd up. If the cows that stay up the top end of my place will be in November, but all of them will get hay until mid-May. Sometimes third week of May.
Right. So we're at the end of our DAP chat. I'm really, really happy that you both participated and taught us so many and shared so many experiences with us. This is going to be this is recorded, so it's going to be on YouTube soon, and we'll put it online. If you have any last words, you can you can say any last words. You can, share.
I don't know. I guess my last word is, as if you are a solid teamster and uh, feel like doing it. Share everything you know, every chance you get. You know, all the people that taught me all along the way are greatly appreciated, and that's including Don Hughes. You know, I pick his brain on things. We can learn a lot from everybody, but guys with experience or people with experience, be willing to share it, and people that are wanting to work horses, get out and do it, and go find somebody to help you if you can, and keep learning and keep doing it. It's the greatest thing there is.
These are the exact words that that are meaningful to DAPNet as well. I mean, they ring something in us. Thank you so much for sharing, and hoping we hear from you on Facebook or in our events. Hope you all enjoyed this, and we'll have another DAPChat in next month too. So thank you again, everyone.
Okay.
Have a
Thanks
nice
for
one.
inviting me.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.